Okay, good morning. As Tony mentioned, I am here today to talk to you about understanding program exclusions. Again, my name is Geetha Kavedi, and I'm also an attorney with the Administrative and Civil Remedies branch of the Office of Counsel. So let's get started at the very beginning. What is exclusion? As Meredith and Tony have mentioned this morning, the OAG has the authority to exclude individuals and entities from participation in Medicare, Medicaid, and other federal health care programs. But what does this mean? What is the practical effect of actually being excluded? Well, the practical effect of exclusion is that no program payment may be made for any items or services furnished, ordered, or prescribed by an excluded individual or entity. But let's think about this in practice. For example, if a home health care aide provides services to a Medicare or Medicaid beneficiary and that aide has been excluded, they would not get paid for those services provided to federal health care program beneficiaries. It is important to note that exclusion does not prevent individuals or entities from working in the private sector. Exclusion applies only to federal health care program payments. Okay, so another thing to think about in terms of exclusion is that items or services furnished at the medical direction or prescription of an excluded physician are not reimbursable when the individual or entity furnishing the items or services knows or should have known about the exclusion. This applies even if the payments are going to someone other than the excluded physician. So practically speaking, if an excluded physician orders a series of tests at your hospital, those tests may not be payable unless you can show that you didn't have any reason to know about the exclusion. And that applies even if those are legitimately provided services that were medically necessary for that federal health care program beneficiary. It is also important to note that no federal health care program payment can be made to cover an excluded individual's salary or benefits, regardless of whether they provide direct patient care. In the example that Meredith cited this morning about the skilled nursing facility, that skilled nursing facility had employed a nurse who was excluded, and that skilled nursing facility had to pay back the portion of that nurse's salary and benefits associated with federal health care program payments. So in the end, the practical effect of exclusion is to significantly reduce the ability of an excluded individual or entity to find employment or contract with any healthcare provider who receives direct or indirect payment from the federal healthcare programs. Okay, so let's think now that we know some practical things about being excluded, let's learn some basic facts about exclusion. As was mentioned earlier today, there are two types of exclusion, mandatory and permissive. Under the IG's mandatory exclusion authorities, we are required to exclude individuals and entities who are convicted of certain offenses, such as convictions related to federal health care program crimes, patient abuse or neglect, felony healthcare fraud, and felony convictions related to controlled substances. The IG also has a number of authorities which are permissive, under which we may exclude individuals and entities, such as if an individual lies on an enrollment application, or is convicted of certain misdemeanor crimes, or loses a state license to practice, fails to provide quality of care, or fails to repay certain federal health care program student loans. It is important to know that anyone can be excluded, not just licensed individuals. So doctors, nurses, billers, secretaries, even corporate entities and officers can be excluded. The length of exclusion is generally a defined period of time, but it may be indefinite for certain types of exclusions, such as those associated with the loss of a state license to practice or with a failure to repay certain federal health care education loans. It is also important to understand that the minimum period of exclusion for mandatory exclusions is 5 years, but that exclusion period can be increased if there are aggravating factors present. The final note about exclusions is that it is important to understand that reinstatement, once your period of exclusion has ended, is not automatic. You have to apply to the OIG and receive a notice that your reinstatement has been granted before you can begin working with federal health care program beneficiaries. Okay, let's learn about checking about exclusion. We've heard a lot about the penalties for employing and contracting with excluded individuals, but how and why should you be screening every day? Or not every day, on a regular basis. As Meredith mentioned, there are CMPs that apply if you employ or contract with excluded individuals. CMPs, again, are civil monetary penalties. CMPs of up to $10,000 for each item or service furnished and listed on a claim for federal health care program reimbursement, as well as an assessment of up to 3 times the amount claim may be imposed. Additionally, the exclusion of the employer can happen in certain extreme circumstances. Secondly, under the Affordable Care Act, the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services also has the authority to deny a provider number to anyone associated with an excluded party. So clearly there are some strong incentives for you to be screening both your employees and any contracted vendors. So let's go to our website and find out how you screen people. Okay, so as was shown to you earlier, this is the home page of our current website. And under the quick links box, you can see that there are links to the Exclusions program and our online exclusions database, known as the List of Excluded Individuals and Entities, or the LEIE. So let's go to the Exclusions program page first. So on the Exclusions program page, you can find a lot of the information that I've been talking about today, as well as more in-depth information on the exclusion authorities and basic facts about exclusion. If you have further detailed questions, I would encourage you to explore this page, particularly the frequently asked questions section, which provides a lot of answers to questions we get on a regular basis. This page also has links to the LEIE, so let's go there now. The LEIE is available and searchable online, and as was shown on the previous screen, it is also available in a downloadable format. People much smarter than me and much more technically savvy can take that downloadable file and match employee lists. I, of course, cannot tell you at all how to do that, but I'm sure there are capable people in your organizations who can figure it out. There is also information on the web about how to use those downloadable databases. So this is our online searchable database, and I wanted to show you what happens on this screen when you put a name in. And my fellow presenters always hate this moment because nobody ever knows who I'm going to pick to put in, but I figured today I would just go straight to the top, and we'll check to make sure the Inspector General isn't excluded. Okay, you were not excluded, so we're happy to report that. This is the screen that you see when you get negative results. It's a screen that when you're excluding your employees, or screening for exclusion of your employees, you should be saving in as a part of your documentation process, or find some other way to document that you're doing your screens. Let's look at what happens when you get a positive result. Okay, so you can see that when you get a positive result, you'll get a list with the name, the general information about the individual or entity that's been excluded, certain specialty information, the exclusion authority, state, and such as common names is the one that I use. There's also opportunities to verify, and you can currently verify using the Social Security number or employment identification number. So there are ways to verify beyond just looking at the name. Okay. So now that we've taken a look around the website, let's go back and get some final screening tips so that I can get you to the break in your first session. I wanted to leave you with just a few takeaways for you to take home when you go to screen in your own organizations. First, screen your employees and vendors before hiring and contracting, and on a regular basis thereafter. It is important to do that to avoid all the liability associated with the employment and contracting with an excluded individual. Second, as you can see on the database, it's very common to get multiple results. So screen all variations of names of an organization or an individual that you're working with, including DBAs and former names, and make sure you have enough identifying information to be able to ascertain whether your employees and contractors are the ones actually shown on the screen. Finally, maintain proper documentation of your searches. It is important to do so that you can prove that if an issue arises that you were doing the searches and maintaining your own records appropriately. But what do you do if you have a match? What do you do if someone that you're working with shows up on the LEIE when you do your screens? You can consider a number of options. One, consider removing the employee from their position while you investigate the matter or work with them to discover what is going on. You could also consider the appropriateness of certain bill holds for your employees or contractors. And finally, as Tony and Meredith have mentioned, this employment of excluded individuals is one of the most common subjects of our self-disclosures that we receive in our office. And Tony will be talking more with you in the next session about how you can actually self-disclose if you discover such an issue. With that, I would encourage you again just to explore our website and get your questions answered. We will be on a break until 10:25. For those of you in the room, the speakers will make themselves available to answer questions. Otherwise, we will be back at 10:25. Thank you.